So, dear friends, welcome to our Engaged Buddhist series. We welcome today artist, OI member, the Order of Into Being member, and longtime practitioner and friend, Brett Crook. Brett is presenting today what we call he calls the six Paramitas in the black hole, socially engaged art to cross over to the other shore. Engaged in the Engaged Buddhism speaker series. And so Brett is a lineage name Bodhisattva, aspiration of the heart, Dhamma name true powerful virtue. So he just became OI here at Deer Park a few months ago. It was a very joyful ceremony. He's an interdisciplinary artist and educator who uses storytelling as a vehicle to distill complex ideas and creative practices to transform outer and inner worlds of being. Using inquiry-based approaches, he designs inclusive processes and products that promote awareness and embody the complexity of loving communities. His objects feature painting, drawing, photography, and elaborate installations to tell pluralistic stories with broad drawing, photography, and elaborate installations to tell pluralistic stories with broad representation. His public projects typically involve community workshops featuring arts, integrated pedagogy, and contemplative strategies along with music, performance, and food to create fluid boundaries between art making, daily life, and healing. And teaching and public speaking are extensions of his social practice that involve communities and dialogue to generate experiences of reflection and insight. And he's received a number of awards. I'll put in the bio for this this series. And yeah, just to say that when I came here to Deer Park, I remember seeing these beautiful murals that I believe you did, Brett, when that was early on here at Deer Park on the dormitories. Remember, and I was so impressed. Yes, it really like was a kind of moving entry for me to come to Southern California, and also just honoring the space and the land on which Deer Park is, as well as the practice that's going on here. So, and then it's been a joy to watch you and your family coming here for years to Deer Park and growing up. And so I feel very honored to welcome you today. So I'll pass it over to Brett. You want me to share a little bit about the schedule as well, or would you like to share?
No, I can share. That's fine. So, thank you, Fa Blue, and yeah, dear Sister Chung Kong, dear Tai, dear noble family, all of you who've come, both practitioners from the Plum Village tradition and people interested in socially engaged practice, or whomever or however you've come here today. Such an honor and joy to be here with you. And so I'm going to plan to share one of my more recent projects, kind of as a scaffold to talk about the six paramitas, and to just give you a little like a run for the schedule. We're going to start with a short guided meditation, and then after that guided meditation, toggle back and forth between a slide presentation and some videos, and a discussion between ending with a discussion between Fa Blue and myself. And I think beforehand we were having some technical difficulties. There seemed to be something wrong with my internet or someone's internet, so bear with us. And if we may get more opportunities to practice than we anticipated, but that'll be part of the talk somehow. So let's start with just a guided meditation. In a moment, I'll ask Papa to ring the bell, but let's just get in a comfortable seated position, and then I will guide you meditation. When you're ready, So I'd like to invite you to imagine a light just shining above you. What size and color and form it takes is up to your imagination. And imagine that light slowly from the top crown of your head, moving down to your forehead, to your eyebrows, to your eyes, to your nose, to your mouth, to your chin, to your throat, releasing any tension as it goes down past your heart, through your diaphragm, your viscera, to your hips. The light slowly going down through the tops of your legs, your knees, your shins, illuminating your ankles, the tops of your feet, the bottoms of your feet. Imagine that light, whatever substrate you are on, going through that substrate down through the foundations into the soil, the mycelia, into the earth. Imagine that light now coming back to the bottom of your feet, to the top of your feet, to your ankles, to your shins. The light moving up to your knees, slowly moving up your thighs, to your sacrum, your pelvis, back up through your spine, your viscera, through your lungs, illuminating your heart, your collarbones, your shoulders, your neck, your chin, your mouth, your nose, your eyes, your eyebrows, the top of your head. And now imagine that light just above your head, illuminating you, the space around you, expanding beyond the space that you're in, illuminating that same light illuminating you is connected to all of the lights we're all illuminating, connecting us all to this moment. Enjoy the silence and the illumination until Faplu brings us now out with the sound of the bell. So thank you all. Just briefly, the Paramitas and socially engaged art, and show you some things, and then I'll toggle back and forth, as I said, and at the end, we'll have a little talk. I got interested in the Paramitas, which is really the quality of contact of being a bodhisattva, or someone who forgoes nirvana to help others, when I was living in New York in the 1990s. I would go to lectures at Tibet House and listen to Robert Thurman and things about Shantideva, and eventually some time with Pema Chodron. And so this was before I got involved in the tradition, but they were inspirations because I'd already had a decade-long practice of working in communities. So it's not entirely a surprise that Bodhisattva Aspiration of the Heart became my lineage name at Deer Park in 2004. But the Paramitas are really for the benefit of others and cultivation and simultaneous liberation. So just for the sake, there's a cheat sheet behind me on that drawing, but to conflate traditions, there's the first is giving, generosity. The second is diligence or enthusiasm. The third, Ty likes to call them the mindfulness trainings, or solidity or joy, compassion. The fourth is inclusiveness or patience. The fifth, meditation. And the sixth, prajna, is really insight or impermanence, or some traditions call it unconditional wisdom. So, Ty likes to say that the Paramitas cultivate a beginner's mind, really make us not afraid of obstacles or to get free to serve other beings. And so with that in context, I'd like to just share something about socially engaged art for those of you who came, some interest in that. And, socially engaged art is more than just like a well-crafted object when we think about art. Socially engaged art really has become kind of a conventional term to explain art that's not only a comment on social issues, but actively engaged in the social processes to transform those conditions. So this kind of practice has gotten more popular, and there's now all kinds of names for it. Social practice art, activist art, political art, art utile, art activism. It's become global, and some people connect it even to, the social movements of the 60s and the art movements of the 60s and those things. And so with that context, I thought I would just show this brief video first to both give more context to those introductions and to my practice.
So let's kind of go through, and then after you see whatever you want to see, then let's just come back here and kick it on the ground. I'll turn on the fan, and then we'll do something down here on the ground and eat some snacks. Okay? Okay. So in here, this is all like storage. Come in here, I'll show you. All right, so I'm gonna start to go around. Everybody got their eyes closed? Use your sense of touch and see what it feels like. Is it soft? Is it smooth? I want to invite you to chew it 30 times slowly. You know, when I first thought about meditation, I thought meditation was like you close your eyes and you like walk on water. And actually meditation is like the reflection on your act. So you may reflect on the act of like, where are 5 sounds that you can hear in the room? Or you may reflect on the act of your chewing the raisin. It can be a word, or it can be a phrase, but write how what we just did was a collaboration to you. So what we just made is a rubric. Who knows what a rubric is? What I like to call it is it's an assessment tool. So like A through F is a rubric. That's a rubric that someone else does to you. Like I, as your teacher, can give you a grade A through F. That's a rubric. My issue with that rubric is, first of all, I get to use my privilege to dictate something on you. My other issue with that rubric is it's hierarchical. So to have A's, you have to have F's. So in this case, we made a rubric that's not hierarchical, and I didn't make it, you made it, about this idea, and now we're gonna do something together. So Exquisite Corpse was this game that the Surrealists made. And the Surrealists were these artists who believed that there was a collective unconscious, and they wanted to figure out, how could you make art that you don't plan it, it just happens? And they made this game called the Exquisite Corpse. So what I want you to do now is fold your paper into thirds, and on this top part, I want you to draw a head. Just look and listen closely. A head, all right? Trade with someone who you haven't seen and then go back to where you're sitting. Part of why I'm saying a head is because a lot of times people hear head and they're like, oh yeah, I got to do a head. But let me just tell you, like when the Surrealists did it, it'd be like a line. Like it would be like designs. So it doesn't have to be the body. And I can just see that already in the room, how much freedom there is, creativity. And that's dope. So, wherever you are, first just open it in front of yourself and look at it.
Did you do that?
Yeah.
That's a top line.
We all collaborated.
That's so cool.
So get to where you can see the rubric.
Each thing tells a story, which is really beautiful.
So what I was just talking about was meditation is reflection and action. And I said dialogue is reflection and action. And I think art making is reflection and action. That you're reflecting on the act of your making. I did this bottom feet, but this isn't mine. It has me in it, but it's really dependent on the other two to be a thing. That's the thing that tells the story. And so part of why I wanted to do this is because what we're gonna do in this collaborative project is kind of the same way. That like a bunch of us, Bamu, myself, all of you, all the choreographers, Rashidi, we all have expertise. And in collaboration, we're putting that expertise together to make something bigger than we could put by ourselves.
3 people want to give props, just raise your hand. And I'm just really appreciative that I'm with everybody here and I get to chew and we're just doing this and it fills me with joy.
I want to give a prop to you too for letting us let go and letting us have this amazing experience.
1, 2, 3.
Sam, I want to give a prop to you for letting us into your space and giving us this experience, but also to all of you, all the Destiny members, because you all were willing to give yourselves over to this and let yourselves just flow and do whatever your mind and heart wanted to.
Well, thank you for your patience. I'm sorry that this is part of the condition of our experience together, but we'll endure. And again, please just keep me posted, because as I'm living it on my side, everything seems fine. So as we continue, part of why I wanted to show this is not that this was the totality of my presentation or the kind of totality of the project. Actually, like the Paramitas, this is just the practice, the beginning. And so this is the beginning of a project called the Black Hole. And the Black Hole was a installation requiem for Oakland youth who were killed before the age of 30. It was conceived with playwright Mark Bamuthi Joseph, Destiny Arts Performance Center artistic director Sarah Crowell, lead artist Rashidi Amari, and myself in this kind of process-based, engaged multiple modalities, including research and installation and performance, to create new public rituals for mourning and healing. The project was kind of inspired for our overwhelming need to kind of memorialize these youth that we knew that were lost to violence. But the focus was not just about kind of illuminating their absence of the young ghost, but it was really about making a mark of their memory. One of the things that the parents really asked for is they wanted their children to be remembered. So by exploring the marks that these young people made before being sucked into the black hole, we kind of affirm the cultural memory like light into the darkness. And so skillfully engaged art, socially engaged art, kind of comes from this kind of relationship community. One of the critiques of socially engaged art, not so much socially engaged Buddhism, is that it's this thing that people parachute into and are not really in relationship. And in the case of this project, because of its sensitive nature, it really mandated that these were people from our ecology. These were people either we knew personally or one degree of separation that were kind of experiencing this. And so now I kind of want to use this project to talk about the black hole. So now I'm going to do some sharing again. Bear with me. And so the 6 paramitas in the black hole. Our first meeting took place, well, let me say the first black hole, the first paramita is dana, giving, generosity. I've heard it sometimes described as the journey of learning to give. This photo is from our first meeting that took place at Destiny Arts in Oakland, literally around the corner from my art studio, where this is going to be. And there you see the 4 of us, Rashidi Omari, Mark Bamuthi Joseph, Sarah, and I. And unknowingly, they are bodhisattvas. They have a history of working literally for decades, each of them relieving suffering of the world, and part of the getting to the other sort that the Paramitas is working in Sangha, in community. And this is a still from that photo that the film we just saw. And these are the young people from Destiny. And so Destiny Arts for 25 years has produced an annual performance. Traditionally, the performance has featured young people's development as central to the year-long production. In this instance, the Black Hole Project asked them to really shift and asked the performers to use the expression to be more about the highlight and the generosity towards the families rather than the young people themselves. So initially that was really challenging for them, and it was another kind of rigorous exploration for them about generosity. And then as a continuation of generosity, this is the first time that the students met the families. And so in this collective practice of generosity was showcased, did group introductions, and had this preliminary performance of Mark Bamuthi Joseph with the company. And then it was followed by a year of home visits, interviews, intermittent get-togethers, some of which I'll show you in a moment. And then the second paramita, vigilance or enthusiasm or discipline. You know, discipline allows us to really be right here and connect to the real moment. One of my favorite contemporary choreographers, Garth Fagan, he has a piece called Discipline is Freedom. I think about that a lot. And so a part of the project is that we gathered for a week-long retreat in the Marin Headlands to connect to the present moment and practice discipline and freedom. And I also like to think of a ritual or ceremony or even council as a sort of discipline. And so there are all these kind of episodes of us convening here as a hike. And then the third paramita, that's what Thai would call the mindfulness trainings. Or sometimes it's thought of as solidity or joy, or compassion, equanimity. Thai talks about the mindfulness trainings as a concrete practices for our protection. And not just the protection of ourselves, but protection of loved ones and also our city and our nation. And so they're non-sectarian, they can be non-religious. And so here you see us gathering and making an altar to the young ghost as a part of our time at the Headlands. And Thai often talks about how there's no real wrongness with seeing that every spiritual tradition has parts of the mindfulness trainings in them. And so I don't think of Destiny as formally a spiritual organization, but certainly a part of their grace has come from 25 years of developing their own tradition that includes a lot of the mindfulness practices, and that Mark and myself and all the leadership kind of significantly contribute towards. And here you can see one of the many examples of discipline where we were making tableaus of grief. So this is a modified theater exercise where we're building a shared language and connection between the families and the participants. And so before I go to the next one, just highlighting, like, this is the embodying a reverence for life. It's true happiness. This is true love. This is loving speech, deep listening, nourishment, healing, really like an embodied, not unlike our opening meditation, like an embodied kind of experience with the 5 mindfulness trainings. And then I would go to 6, or not 6, excuse me, I'm conflating my numbers. This is the 4th paramita, inclusiveness, patience. And this is actually with the funders. And so in some traditions, this is from Thai, the 4th paramita of inclusiveness, we train ourselves in the art of embracing. And then our heart will grow larger and larger every day and be able to embrace people and their difficulties. And so part of my work in this project, all of our work, is kind of to be intermediaries, not only between the families and the community entities and the members, but even here with the funders, building a real sense of personal relationship to the project and its process. So unlike so many organizational, institutional actions, this is not a disconnected form of philanthropy. This is actually really intimate and connected, not an exploited rendition cloaked as service. And then here is back in my studio, and each of the family drawing of their young one that was deceased. And so it's just another example of like the way that the families were just included again and again throughout the process. And this is Sultan Karim Bey Robinson. And so the black hole features elegies for 6 young ghosts, young people of color who've been lost to violence. This is Yasmin Afu Van. And so these 6 portal veves were informed by the Voodoo tradition of ritualized objects that invite and represent the presence of divine spirits. This is Vernon Matthew Eddins Jr. Through a sensitive discovery process, performers from Destiny Arts Youth Company and Elders Project uncover symbols and clues on how each young person's life might be celebrated. And this is Alex Lee Goodwin. The resulting 6 artworks were decorated with inspiration from the family interviews, photographs, Black Hole Project. And this is Salim Oshid Tyndall. They're each painted on me. We can recognize ourselves within rather than apart from these affirmations of cultural memory, really celebrating Black lives. And this is Victor Guidel Ajahe Makalani. And you can see the images from his childhood, time with his parents, even the tattoo on the bottom of his lover's hand that the lover had made after he was deceased. And this is done with spray paint and paint pen on mirrored plexiglass, regular plexiglass, wood, special metal prints, string lights, artificial flowers. And each of these is about 8 feet in diameter. Okay, so we did all this with the aspiration that there were going to be 6 community kind of like intimate rituals, and then 9, I think, large performances at this 300 seats theater at Laney College here in Oakland. And 2 weeks before that was about to happen, COVID-19 mandated shelter in place. So in lieu of the 10 performances and the 6 site-specific installations, we had to pivot the whole project. And part of how we adapted that is we decided that we would turn it into a film. And so the film kind of stayed grounded in the conditions and the theory of what we're going to make as a performance, but also manifested as something else. And so now, hopefully, if the internet spirits work with us, I'm going to show you a clip of that.
Lift me up, hold me down, keep me close, safe and sound. Burning in a hopeless dream. Hold me when you go to sleep. Keep me in the warmth of your love when you depart. Keep me safe, safe and sound. Lift me up, hold me down, keep me close, safe and sound. Drowning in an endless sea. Take some time and stay with me. Keep me in the strength of your arms. Keep me safe, safe and sound. Lift me up, hold me down, keep me safe, safe and sound. Burning in a hopeless dream. Hold me when you go to sleep. Keep me safe. We need light. We need love.
Let me tell you about streets anywhere we go. Dog them serious, dog them not nervous. Boy, let me tell you about man we cool like a Eskimo. No boy can go round we. Hey, I know so the things hit me G. One phone call it take to make some boy wipe up her hurt and drop down flat. From you not stop my food, dog. Me no matter about you and me no care about that. Can't talk in my face. Say them run place, I run them run round that. Man a action back, some boy only full of tough chatter. Enough of them stairs up, enough of them stairs up, enough of them stairs up. Talk them a talk, no action fi back. Enough of them stairs up, enough of them stairs up, enough of them stairs up. Chat them a chat, me no pay that, no mind hear that. Empty barrel a make nice dog, them a no nobody, them a no nobody. Yeah. Can't step to the president, all of me dogs, them a be a mad smaddy. Yeah. Have a one piece of metal and a post dog, you no bad man from nowhere. You must see the whole of your life, cause it not work if you step to me. Enough of them stairs up, enough of them stairs up, enough of them stairs up. Talk them a talk, no action fi back. Enough of them stairs up, enough of them stairs up, enough of them stairs up. Chat them a chat, me no pay that, no mind hear that. One phone call it take fi make some boy wipe off her hurt and drop down flat. From you not stop my food, dog. Me no matter about you and me no care about that. Can't talk in my face. Say them run place, I run them run round that. Man a action back, some boy only full of tough chatter. Enough of them stairs up, enough of them stairs.
So, Fop Blue, why don't we hear one sound of the bell, please? So, thank you for enduring for this. I'm so sorry. I have a sense that this is not smooth in its reception, but hopefully the intent is being conveyed, and it gets more smoothly as we finish strong. But now we're on the fifth paramita, and that's dhyana, or meditation. And so the practice of mindfulness helps us to touch the wonders of life. They're so refreshing and healing. And I really think of this video clip I just showed as kind of a documentation of ritual. And I think of rituals as instruments for mindfulness. But more literally, you know, the process of all the gatherings through this project, every time we had a rehearsal or a staff meeting or a family meeting or any time of things, we literally practice meditation. It's a part of Destiny Art's kind of foundational framework. So in that way, we were really literal about meditation. But in my practice, I often cite Brazilian educational giant Paulo Freire, who talks about true dialogue as reflection and action. That's really a praxis, a battle of those things, a balance of those things together that represent dialogue. And I remember being at a retreat at Deer Park in the early 2000s, and I heard Ty mention meditation as reflection and action. And so really part of this is like an embodiment of meditation throughout this project. But because of the pandemic, there were many adjustments that we had to make to that catastrophe that grew into new manifestations. And so, you know, one of the things that happened was the students are really struck by shelter in place. It was really challenging for them. So we started meeting with them regularly as kind of another manifestation of the project. Or coincidentally, during George Floyd, a number of those students ended up organizing protests that became nationally recognized here in the Bay Area. And then the last thing I'd like to show you in this keynote and last brief clip is just one other manifestation that came in the pivot that shelter in place kind of inspired. And so lastly, I was part of a monumental exhibition that was entitled Brett Cook and Liz Lerman, Reflection and Action. That was a retrospective and forward motion, a deep dive into the past and present and future of myself and legendary choreographer, writer, teacher, thinker, Liz Lerman at Yerba Buena Gardens for the Center for the Arts in San Francisco in 2003. And so as senior fellows at Yerba Buena from 2019 to 2023, myself and Liz turned Yerba Buena's galleries into an entire footprint of the building and the space into a collective creation and inspiration for all kinds of social practices, including video, dance, installations, paintings, convenings. This is just the side of one of the buildings. And audiences were encouraged to explore our artistry as catalysts for enacting collaborative change in the world. Reflection and Action was conceived not only as an exhibition, but as an inspiration for audiences to embody their own creative power. This is one of the rooms filled with decades of my projects from around the world, as well as things from Liz. Throughout the exhibition, community and artist-centered programming. We had in workshops, retreats, performances, podcasts, and panels were all planned with collaborators, including Destiny Arts, Movements Generation, the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley, Youth Speaks, Life is Living Festival, the People's Conservancy, amongst other. And Liz and I had a very popular Alchemy of Reset podcast conversation series that focused on utilizing creative practices to inspire systems change and structural change. And then in one gallery, the black hole was prominently displayed. And so it was just another way of really magnifying or the continuation of these spirits for these families. One reviewer that came to the show, one journalist, I should say, wrote, that the installation serves its intended function was confirmed by a recent visit to the YBCA gallery, where Lynette McElhaney, Victor's mother and former Oakland City Council member, was observed communing with her son's portrait. McElhaney's suffering has been the most public of all the young ghost mothers. It's entirely ironic that the founder of Oakland's Department of Violence Prevention was later personally impacted by violence. She will never be the same again. But on this Thursday afternoon, in a nearly empty gallery, she appears to be having a therapeutic experience, staring into Victor's portrait and thinking unspoken words. The installation won't bring her son back, but it allows her to interact with his image in a deeply spiritual way. And let me share one last. Oh, no, before I do that. We also made, I should show you, this commemorative booklet. And so here's a still from the video. It's on fancy paper. Has the whole narrative inside about the project. And then inside of these, we made our own artworks that people could take home. And each one features each of the young ghosts. And then on the back, there's a quote from their family, as well as some narrative about the show that really talks about them, not as a deceased entity to be forgotten, but as like a person that was alive, still living, still their continuation. And so the last thing I want to show you is that then that performance that we wanted to do that was canceled because of COVID, we actually did that. So we had a series, one day, 3 in a row, of another manifestation of that performance. It's kind of, the title was The Black Hole Calling Our Young Ancestors Home. And it was an immersive experience at Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, featured dance, poetry, excerpts from the feature film. The special event featured Mark Bamuthi Joseph and Sarah Qual and Kyla Searle, Rishi Omari, Risa Jarsolo, the Destiny Arts Center, both the youth company and the elders company, in a one-day series of performances that were staged inside the exhibition. And now I'm just going to show you a short clip of that.
In my bones, I know I will not be the person I was. None of us will be. And soon, that collective tension and grief is gonna simultaneously spill into the street, humans hanging furtively with the urge to connect, a polarity of tentative health and death, a hard restart, a new beginning, a refresh. There's probably a less violent way to describe the very genesis of the known universe, but some probably white, probably man decided we were gonna call it the Big Bang. Big, like gun. Bang, like drum. Let a black hole tell it the universe begins with music and violence. Like how a young man's Friday Oakland night might go from silence to sirens, tone and tumult. It's a universal truth. We're all becoming something else. Even if all we become is a memory, all humans are becoming something other than our bodies. Let the black hole tell it humans are chaos theory, sewn up sacks of the same stuff as stars, bearing the scars of the capacity to love. I love black people. Whole. Music and violence at the center, held together by love and self-forgiveness, a circle black and whole like town business or the corner of 125th and Frederick Douglass. There are dark matters exploding like a sun this spring, black people disproportionately dying, racism still the deadliest virus, and we will not be who we were. United States visions scattered like dividing snakes, shedding their skins while slithering away. Fluid transformation, poem and mourning in motion, life and death and light and dark and art. On Earth, Little Richard passing is a cosmic event. On Earth, black music at its best is an exploded black hole responding to the call of America at its worst. In the new beginning, the world is blinded by the light of the best of us. D-Nice spinning and Michelle in here with the rest of us. Art is the post-COVID Big Bang. Inevitably, there is a black hole at its center, marking life and death, systemic racism and economic stress, the energy of 7 billion suns and love above it all. We rally around each other. We've been here before. There's no beginning and there is no end. You felt this on the dance floor. In the time of fracture, we are whole and healing. Star on the marquee bright. Welcome to the evolution shine. An exploded black hole, a new beginning. Big, like the pit of the black imagination. Whole, like all of us hitting the drum, calling in a healthy world to come.
Okay. So I see people in the chat asking about the videos. I'll give some content links and context at the end. Thank you for your interest. And so let's finish so I can have some time to talk with Fablu. But we're on the 6th paramita. And that's the last, and that's prajna. So insight, impermanence, interbeing, or unconditional wisdom. And this is actually one of the pieces of the paramita that's really been fundamental in my own practice. And I think a lot about the Taoist story of the farmer and the horse. So once there was this farmer, and he had a horse and a farm, and the horse got away. And everyone in the village was like, oh, this is terrible. Your horse is gone. What are you going to do? You're an old man. You can't farm. You don't have a horse. This is just terrible. And so the next day, horse comes back. 5 other wild horses come back with it. Village is like, this is great. This is amazing. This is so good. Now you have all these horses. You can farm so much more. You can make more money. This is fantastic. So the next day, his son is trying to break in one of the horses, falls off, breaks his leg. Everyone in the town is like, oh, this is terrible. You're an old man. You can't farm without you. You're going to do this. This is terrible. And then the next day, the emperor comes looking to draft for soldiers for the army, but the son can't go because he has a broken leg. And so the 6th paramita, not unlike the story, is there's an idea when I first started studying it, like this is the thing to take me to the other shore, the thing to relieve my suffering, that would be about like somehow getting beyond suffering, beyond like the experience of suffering directly in life, but really like what is good or bad? It's just what I make it to be in my own. So it's really not like getting to the other shore. It's not even a shore to get to. There's no oars. There's not even a boat. It's just emptiness. Pema Chodron calls this, actually it's a path to explore everlastingly. And so in social engaged practice, certainly I could have been upset that we had the pandemic and it was frustrating. But in that moment, it was how do I be present with these conditions and what other manifestations are graceful responses to the needs of the students, the families, the community. And as a result, we made a film. As a result, it was an exhibition. As a result, we made a booklet. So subsequently, all these other great manifestations or just empty manifestations came that would never have appeared if it hadn't been for that kind of conditioning. So in that way, I think of, not only all of the paramitas about this kind of liberation, but it's like socially engaged art. It's like an ongoing reflection, an ongoing action. And hopefully, like the black hole, like in this moment, just an ongoing continuation. So with that, I'd like to just end with the bell, and maybe Fablu, you and I could talk for a minute if the internet will support us.
Okay. Wow, thank you so much, Brett. Can everyone hear okay? Okay. So I think we all felt so moved to see you bringing together all these young people and giving them hope and a space to grieve. And I was reflecting on how important ceremony and ritual is as a way of processing emotions and grief on an individual and a collective level. And I think you remember in 2007 when Thai went back to Vietnam and had these mass requiem ceremonies to process the grief of all those who died in the wars in Vietnam and out in the ocean. And So I'm curious, but just to ask a question, like how do you see this practice of developing ceremony and ritual through art developing, and how can people who are here listening be a part of that? Like, not all of us are, maybe have the skill to create that kind of art, but I see, the whole time I've known you, you're a community builder. You're always bringing people together with your presence, with your art. So I guess that's my first question. Like, how can we do it? How can we build community? How can we create these kind of rituals? It's just so important for healing intergenerational trauma and in the collective consciousness. It's a big question.
Well, I think, yeah, I think part of what I'd hoped by sharing this is not so much that it could be a template that would be replicated,
Mm,
although some people in the process of making it, like, were thinking that it might become that. I think it's more to your point of this idea that for so many types of transformation, particularly grief, it has to be embodied.
mm,
There have to be structures or architectures, I believe, as a part of that process to transform. In making this, I saw something about grief that someone said grief is like lifting a dumbbell. So at first it's really heavy, and then as you continue to work with it, but it never goes away. Like, it never does not weight.
mm,
And so I think
mm,
the black hole just represents a really original, creative approach to making a new kind of embodied response in a culture that really doesn't have a lot of skillful or illuminating methods for dealing with grief.
mm,
I mean, that was happening concurrent to the pandemic, and that was one of the really profound things for me, was recognizing like how little skillful kind of address of that catastrophe was really happening. And so many of us experienced so much grief through the pandemic, both personally in terms of losing loved ones, to the trauma of the experience, to the challenge of the condition. And there were very few like collective, popular, national, international kind of creations to help us transform that trauma. And as a result, in many ways, we're still manifesting that suffering. So I think that is part of what I wanted to kind of share about socially engaged art, is like, this is when people ask me what I do, like they're like, oh, you're a painter, or like you're a teacher, or you're a community organizer, or it's like, it's really this lattice work of capacities in service to bringing people together and really reflecting and acting based on the collective need. That, in the spirit of the Paramitas, ends up being about my own liberation. Like, it's because of that practice of doing this for 30 plus years that I've had the privilege of transforming with so many communities that have transformed my own self, my understanding of the world. And so I guess part of the inspiration is me rooting for all of us, all of you with me, to make those things up. Like, the real art of this is not just that I know how to paint, although I can paint well. It's really, I think I'm advocating for thinking of creativity as like, how do we make our lives? How do we make how do we use our awareness that comes from meditation or from practice to skillfully build the conditions where we can transform whatever our talents or gifts might be.
mm, mm. Yeah, the whole time I was watching the presentation, I was just thinking about action, and action is thought, it's speech, and the act of painting, of using what's around us as an expression of what's inside of us. And this, I find more and more here at the monastery, people are coming up and they're just desperately trying to find a community, and there's a kind of fear that's gripping a lot of people and making their lives kind of interaction with just computers and smartphones and even picking up food, which used to be a communal thing. In the pandemic, people are, they're putting it on the curb and you pick it up and bring it back. And so I've been asking myself, is it fear? What is it that has grown in our consciousness, which is actually bringing this loneliness about and our detachment from community? And so, I mean, I ask myself because when people come up and we're sharing the practice, I find myself often talking about how to cultivate non-fear. And so I'm want to ask you, like, how, it's quite bold what you do. You go out, you get criticism, you get feedback. Like, how can people not close in on themselves and just close their door, you just lock themselves in, lock themselves off from community because of this fear of being judged or criticized? How do you cultivate non-fear in order to just put yourself out there and say, this is who I am, this is what I do, come be a part of it?
Yeah, well, it makes me think of what I was saying in that piece about like how we even found the families. It's like this wasn't something that was outside of my relationship. Part of someone, I've taught courses on social engaged art in universities and different places, and for a time it was very popular. And the way that other institutions would scaffold is they would send students to a homeless shelter, or they would send students to some setting that wasn't really a part of their relation. And maybe because they were younger, they had less fear than what you're talking about. But it's in that frame, it is dangerous. It is scary. I talked about Paulo Freire. He talks about, to have true dialogue, it's reflection and action. If you have action without reflection, it can be violent. Or if you have reflection without action, it's just inert. So I think part of it is like, how do we look at the conditions with awareness of what our needs are first for ourselves and start from that place? It takes so much courage to deal with those fears in ourselves. And by watering the seeds in ourselves to cultivate that solidity, that equanimity, then it starts to be like, what are the relationships with myself and the people immediately around me? How do I cultivate that relationship? And then from that, if that grows stronger, it's like, okay, how do we in Sangha with this group maybe go a little bit further? Then do it some outside. But it really does kind of scaffold off of like the solidity in ourselves. That it isn't just about how do I not be afraid. It is about cultivating a non-fear. And I think that's another byproduct of this kind of work, is that then it does build the conditions of non-fear for the people that are in it. For those families, initially there was so much trepidation, even though they were in grief, to be a part of this. It was really the skillfulness of Sarah and myself and Mark and all of us to help them feel safe. So that they would be willing to go through this, that I'd like to think, has been a really transformational experience for them, really liberating experience for them. And just, the fact that we're still talking about this project now, it's years later and it's still echoing, and their kids are still being thought of and lovingly championed and exemplified, is in ways that they could never imagine. So I do think there's a part of that non-fear I've had to cultivate over time, and a certain, and in best instances, it's a reflection of the connection to the communities or the individuals that I'm working with.
I'm curious, like, how you see Thai manifesting in the work that you do. I mean, as a teacher, I just seen how dedicated you are to the practice and this love for Thai as a kind of guide in his path. And I wonder how you practice to reflect on that. I've been teaching a course on Thai life, and so we've been reflecting a lot on like, who is Thich Nhat Hanh? asking ourselves in our heart, like as a kind of koan, in the way we all reflect on our own moral and ethical decisions and what we decide to do and not do in life. And so I'm just curious how you see that manifesting in your own path.
Well, it makes me think. I recently told this story, and I think you were there, Fablu, of um, I was fortunate enough to return to Vietnam with Thich Nhat Hanh the first time after 39 years. I was part of that international delegation. And I remember we were I think we're in Hanoi. And for the people on the Zoom, basically all of us, both the monastics and the national delegation, were in robes, and we're all traveling in these 5 chartered buses. And so this is a time in Vietnam, it's illegal to be in groups. There's still this ambiguity about Buddhism and spiritual practice being that public. And so we're traveling through Hanoi, and it's like these 5 giant buses. Everyone's on mopeds, like even just a bus is like a rarefied transport manifestation. And there's 5 of them, and everyone's got like robes on, and we're driving through Hanoi. Okay. And we're driving through this shopping district.
Remember, there were no traffic
What'd you say?
There were no traffic.
Yes, no traffic lights, just and packed. Okay. And we drive to this roundabout, and all of a sudden the bus stops. And so I'm in the bus, like we're stuck. Like, what's going on? Like, and I'm looking out the window, and it's packed. It's in the shopping district. There are all these people around. And then someone on the bus is like, "Get out. We got to get out." And so we all get out of the bus, and Ty has us do walking meditation in this like crowded roundabout center of Hanoi, like bustling, congested urban setting, and just has us start walking down the street in a line of whatever it is, 300 people. And I can't even convey, like, everyone just dropped their mopeds, like came out of the stores. People are standing in the doorways of the stores, standing in the middle of the street, just staring at us. And some people are mouths are agape, like incredulous. Other people are bowing. Other people are totally like confused, like just the gamut of expressions. And it was something like I wanted to take a picture. I was like, there's no way I can capture the sensation of this moment, the feelings, the expression. But for me, it was such a reflection of his radicality as a teacher in a nonviolent way. Like, what a radical act for us who, he's the most famous Vietnamese person on the planet. And here we are after 39 years, and people are following us. And, you were there, Fablu. Like, when we'd come to the airport, there'd be people all the time wanting to be around us. So we have all this attention already. And he's choosing to use that attention in a skillful way to model mindfulness and the practice of peace beyond stakes. It makes me think of that teaching, the difference between a rebel and an outlaw. So like a rebel is just like an undigested kind of reaction to conditions, like a kind of immature, anachristic gesture to just be rebellious. Or like an outlaw, someone who loves so much that they go outside the law, not because they're rebelling against the law, but because their love of the world and of people is so great, it transcends the container or the conditions that say what's normal or appropriate. And so I think of Thai in my work in many different ways, sometimes much more didactic and literal than this, but your question really makes me think of that. That part of making original things is like transcending the conditions of what could be. Like, that's real creativity. I mean, I think one of my other kind of tenets is like, as someone who was trained as a artist and as a teacher, I first thought being an artist was you make great paintings or you make great performances or you make great poems. But I've kind of come to understand, like, being a great artist is how you make your life. So I know people who are venture capitalists or chefs or teachers, and the way they think of algorithms or the chemistry of flavors or curriculum is so creative. and they get to make what they want to make. Whereas I also know people who show all over the world, dance all over the world, perform all over the world, and in many ways their lives are not that creative. They're living in a little apartment in New York where they don't want to be. They're teaching something they don't want to teach. They don't have a family, like all these kind of tropes that are really stereotypes of being an artist that really aren't that creative. So, I often think of one of the first things I remember writing down from Ty at the People of Color retreat in 2002, 2004 was him saying, like, part of being a Buddhist is cultivating a mind without limits. And I kind of think like part of being a creative person for me is not just that I can paint good. It's like, how do I create and imagine and envision beyond like what I could before, beyond my own limits for the benefit of myself and other beings.
So Ty is an outlaw. I love it.
Yeah. But in a loving, in the way that is loving. I mean, that's part of the radicality of it, that it's not the subservience to how things, how we're going to save people from a war, how we're going to support the trauma of those people, how we're going to support immigrants to new countries, how we're going to support people suffering. He's not limited by the geographic or cultural constraints of how that's supposed to be done. He's made it up.
So I have a question that maybe you can help us. We've been cooking up something very much rooted in Thai's vision for the School of Youth for Social Service. This movement in Vietnam in the 60s to go out and work with people to build community and grow community, and also concretely they were helping to bring sanitation and medicine and education to villages that didn't have any of those outside of Saigon. And Thai really, I mean, Wake Up was a vision. Thai wanted young Buddhists for a healthy and compassionate society, and so when we started Wake Up, it was very much that vision, and it had tours and built sanghas of young people. And I see that here at Deer Park, we have a lot of conditions to actually have something like a kind of training program, a more comprehensive way of getting young people together. Maybe they finish high school, they finish college, and spend 15 months in the monastery. And so we're really looking into, like, in fact, part of the series, starting the series, was to see like, well, how do we do it? Like, how do you? I mean, I see the way you are bringing the young people in, working with them, having them express their creativity. So we've been asking ourselves, it's a group of about 10 of us now in this core group, like, what does a training program look like? Or, I mean, what we do here at Deer Park, and we're trying to fit it all in. Like, how do you get young people, out of the kind of silos they find themselves in, or in the kind of tracks they find themselves in? Like, I had to do to become a monk as white male American, and I had to come out of a lot of these tracks, and that's not easy. And so I sometimes I wonder, I mean, does everyone have to be an outlaw, or is there a way to kind of help guide young people on this path that we're talking about? So anyway, I'd love to have your guidance and input.
The thing that comes most up for me immediately is it made me think about my projects. So when I was young and ambitious and idealistic, kind of to your point, the aspiring bodhisattva, I would just go to places, not always so skillfully, but with this like idealism to make change. And then eventually what became really useful as I started recognizing, like I mentioned a moment before, what are the communities I'm already in relationship with? But then increasingly I started recognizing, like, who are the communities I want to learn from? Like, let me
Mm.
make something with them. Like, they're already doing it great. How can I align myself with whoever it might be, this women's health clinic or this school or this civic organization or critical resistance or whatever the entity would be? Like, how do I align with them? And then it's really through that relationship, there's reciprocity. Like, I'm offering my gifts, my talents, my energy, and I'm learning their methodology. I mean, this is
Mhm.
another way that I explain my practice, and it comes from another Buddhist teacher. You know, I used to early in my practice, like, I basically just approached every project like with one tool, like with a hammer. Like, I painted faces, and I'd come and I interview you, and I paint your face, and I put it up all over your neighborhood, and it was powerful. And I transformed, people transformed, but it was basically like one tool. So it's kind of like if you used one tool and you had to fix a door. So if you had a hammer, that might fix the door, but it actually might be better if you like just had some sandpaper to like take off the bottom. Or
Mm.
you might do better if you had a screwdriver and you took it off the hinges.
Mm.
And so what I've had to go through personally is through lots of projects, I expanded my tools. That it
Mm.
was through the relationship with different communities doing powerful things that it was also part of my transformation that expanded my capacity so that pretty soon I had a big toolkit. So
Mm.
now I have more privilege that people invite me to places, and part of their understanding is I'm going to come with a toolbox.
Mm.
And so there might not even be a painting. Like, there might not even be something outside. It might just be a block party, or it might just be a performance, or it might just be
Mm.
a meal, or it might just be a Zoom call with a monastic. Like, it can be all these different forms. But part of that literacy for me has been built with relationships of really skillful entities over time. And that's kind
Mm.
of not unlike this practice, like realizing this has been around forever or for a long time. So it's not like it had to be reinvented. It's just once I got connected to it, I was um, made more whole,
Mm.
improved. So the first thing comes to me is thinking, like, what are the ways that within the Sangha, there's so many dynamic people, practitioners. It's been part of the thing that's been such a gift for me to be in relationship to the Sangha.
Mm.
It's like, how do we build with them?
Mm.
Find so many of them are just, they're not on the Zoom call. They're just underground doing that work
Mm.
and finding good allies to work with and learn from.
Mm. Mm. All right. Well, thank
So
you.
we
So,
can, yeah.
so oh,
I
thank you.
guess we did want to share.
Yeah.
Well, no, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, just thank you so much for taking this time today. I just feel grateful that we can have a chance to showcase the beautiful work you do. Because I mean, even I learned and saw many things that I didn't know about what you'd been doing, Brett, and I'm grateful for everyone joining us today. And yeah, maybe if you want to share a little bit about the offering that people, if anyone wants to make to this for in gratitude for this. The space we created today.
Yeah, they invited me to, in the spirit of generosity, if there was anyone who wanted to offer Donna. And since I'm in the Bay Area, if you're inspired, you can donate to the East Bay Meditation Center. So the East Bay Meditation Center it's not directly part of the Deer Park tradition, but ironically, some of its leadership are OI members at this time. And it's what Jack Corfield calls the most diverse planet, the most diverse Sangha on the planet. That just so happens to be in Oakland where this project takes place. And so I've put that link there. So indirectly it supports our Sangha because many of the local people here and people from our tradition are involved there. And then to other people's questions, you can find the Black Hole Project. Some of those videos, 2 of the 3, I believe, are on my website. I put that in chat. And there are other folks there from other times and other places. You can see parts of my practice, as well as if you're interested in contacting me, you can contact me through my website. And I just want to say thank you. Like, it's such an honor and pleasure to be here. It's such a, to get this invitation.
Okay. So, thank you so much, Brett, and thank you everyone for joining us. And we'll, I think we'll splice together this with our video editor. So with the high res videos that you showed, Brett, so it can be a kind of unitary experience for people online. So everyone, please, you can experience it again when we get it up on our YouTube channel at Deer Park. So thank you again, Brett, and thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Sarah Lane, for producing this episode. And we'll finish with, if it's okay, with 3 sounds of the bell. Thank you so much, Brett. Thank you, everyone. And we'll do our best to post this soon so others can enjoy. And please visit us soon again at Deer Park. Take care.